Welcome, everyone, back to the Rise Above Heartless Materialism podcast, where we loosely discuss topics based around what it is to be a human being in the age of corporate technocracy. It's not a strict categorization, so don't fault me if I drift a little bit from the topic. But today, I'm really hoping that we will talk about something that is like very closely aligned with that theme, and that is Christianity and art, and the current state of art, the art scene in Christianity today. Art being the broad sense of the term, not just paintings. And today I have with me my good friend Andrew Miller. Andrew is a game designer, a illustrator, graphic designer, and he does some sketching and stuff like that. So just a super talented, super thoughtful guy. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So Andrew attends you attend a Presbyterian church, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Grace Chapel in Lincoln is a Presbyterian church, which when we started attending, I really didn't honestly know exactly what that meant. We have mostly selected churches based on our neighborhood, like trying to, be involved in a church that's serving our neighborhood or, our town. But in the last year or so, I've really been trying to learn more about church history and how denominations got to be where they are, and the different types of theology that different denominations adhere to. And I have Presbyterian churches are Reformed theology, and I have some serious qualms about Reformed theology. But that is very much a process that I'm kind of going through right now, because I think it's something that I've been pretty lax about, and I certainly didn't receive from my church upbringing. I grew up in a church that was very, as I'm learning now, not even technically Protestant at all.
What?
Yeah, Church of Christ came from the Restoration, right? Which was kind of this post-Civil War movement, actually led by former Presbyterian ministers. But the idea that started the Restoration movement was that the church had died out, which is just like a bonkers idea. I think is really a really not I don't think that's what I think it's a really you have to get to a really prideful place to be able to say, all right, the entire church is dead, I can see it, and I need to restart the church, right? I think that's just
that's happened many times in history.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're a lot farther along in that process than I am studying church history. I have not really made any serious independent study of such. So that is very, very cool.
It's a super interesting topic, and I'm really trying to, I guess, acquire a little more of an education that I was not given growing up, because my Church of Christ tradition essentially went roughly after the book of Acts, the church started going wrong and like died out, except as like a husk of itself, basically. Like it was a
Mhm.
very seems like a very anti-Catholic movement. I got a lot of that just like in the water growing up,
Mhm.
and um, uh, but also kind of like anti-Protestant as well, because
Yeah.
the Protestants were also, so far wrong that they weren't the church anymore.
Mhm.
I don't think it's biblical to say that the church will ever completely die out. I
Mhm.
think that's just, I think that's a really uh, misguided statement.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, I think there's a big difference between the idea of like reforming the church, change within the church, which does I think regularly need to happen,
Mhm.
um, and uh, restarting the church because I don't know, the church is so heretical and bad that it's not the church anymore.
Yeah.
So like that's the origin of Church of Christ, and I think you know uh, I think it's a huge I think there were a lot of people, and like we were in a non-denominational church that was kind of like not serious enough for the Church of Christ, I guess. And there are a lot of non-denominational churches that come from kind of these restorationist, did I say that right?
I think
Churches.
so.
Um, uh, and you know, the one thing that they kind of hold in common is like really suspicious of church history, of like uh, what context and the creeds and any sort of uh, uh, like institutional knowledge
Mhm.
within the church, and also things that just kind of like they're really iconoclastic, really like seriously skeptical about the arts kind of in general.
Right.
It's just it's a whole bundle of theology that is, um, I think a lot of it is mistaken.
Yeah.
Um,
I wanted to circle back what you said about and just the notion that the church has been dead for a certain amount of time. Like to me, that's unbiblical because Christ said, "You're my, you're the rock, and upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So to me, I mean, I suppose there's always ways you can interpret that. Oh, well, it's symbolic of something else. I don't know. I'm not a biblical scholar, but on the surface, on the face value, it seems like, well, that just means that, well, that means the church died and the devil kind of prevailed for quite some time. We have some of that thinking in Catholic circles too. Um, More of the sedevacantist positions that there is no pope. The church is the real church is not the real church. We are the real church, and which is kind of like makes your head spin a little bit. So it's like, wait, so the gates of hell prevail against the church? I think so.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah, but it's very tempting because so many times those in the church fail, and when you see that, the temptation is like, well, let's just start a clean slate. Let's just start
Mhm.
over. And it sounds
Yeah.
very proper, and I think it's a very natural tendency to want to do that. But it's from a biblical perspective, I think it's a trap.
Yes. Yeah. And one that, you know, uh, uh, it's schism, right?
Hmm.
Like, when are you looking at the Bible and it kind of like early church fathers? When is it uh, okay to break with the church and start your own church? And like I don't think it's really clear that that is like separating from the church, like choosing yourself to separate from the church and start your own church is really ever justified. Like there's examples even of like there's heresy in the church. What do you do? I mean, you speak out against it and you try to, you know, denounce the false teachers and try to like reform the church. I think from what I've like like I think the Protestant Reformation was as I've dug into it, I've realized that's seems to be somewhat different because Luther's intention seemed to be like he wanted to reform the Catholic Church. And I would be interested in hearing like what the Catholic view is, right? Because he, you know, he was excommunicated from Catholic Church, and at that point, like if you've been actually forcibly kicked out of the church, then that's not you choosing to go start a new church. That's not a schism. That is like you cannot be in the church. So, you know, you have to do your best to do God's will outside of it.
Yeah. I haven't done my own research, but I've been told that there were emissaries from the Vatican who did try to meet and reason with Luther, but he refused for whatever reason. But the whole issue of Luther, it's a very sad tale because, and I don't know the full story, but from what I understand, like at least the whole business of selling indulgences, like the church had some rotten things going on at the time. So I personally wouldn't fault Luther for everything that he said. Obviously, there's some things I disagree with, and I know he struggled with some severe scrupulosity, and that can do some pretty terrible things to a person. You know, one might think, "Oh, well, you're just being morally careful, right?" It's like, yeah, that's a trap. It's a big trap. So yeah, but that's a good point that if in fact he didn't choose to leave, you know, he was excommunicated, then that would be an issue. I would be interested to learn further about that situation.
Yeah.
But anyway, I would love to talk more about the arts. It sounds like I know we've talked when in your upbringing with the Church of Christ, there was kind of a suspicion of the arts, you know, at least in liturgical settings. So what in general have you observed about conservative Christians' approach to the arts? What's the good, what's the bad, and what's the ugly?
Yeah. So I think I'm mostly going to be able to talk about Christian arts kind of within like a non-sacred setting because I have not grown up in a church that had any sort of like any sort of sense of sacred art. Like this is and I'm still like Presbyterians are still iconoclastic, like very suspicious of like, okay, well maybe since religious art, there's a potential for it to be idolatrous. Maybe we should just not have any. I think is the general stance of Presbyterians, and is certainly the stance of Church of Christ. This is not necessarily what I believe. I think there's a lot of like I think this could be idolatry is not a sufficient reason to banish arts from the church, the sacred arts. But there are also like other traditions that are like Lutheranism that do have sacred arts.
Hmm.
But I can't really speak to that too much. I'm mostly
Right.
going to be talking about Christians kind of making art like in the public sphere, I guess. Right.
Hmm.
And I've been thinking about like conservative Christians making art. I think there's kind of like, if you're thinking about people who are generally, like politically conservative and theologically conservative tend to go together. Like, just like politically progressive and theologically progressive tend to like go together.
Hmm.
Um, and I think there's kind of a, three types of Christians or people who would call themselves Christians making art in the public sphere. There's kind of like the conservative Christians who are making specifically Christian art, right?
Hmm.
Like the, fireproofs and the, uh, you know, uh, Thomas Kincaid and like explicitly, this is Christian art with a Christian label on it.
Hmm.
There's, let's say, like progressive Christians who essentially like, I mean, it's not clear that they believe anything that would make them Christian, on the extreme edge.
Hmm.
And their art is not really substantially different from just like secular art of the age, right?
Right.
And then there's kind of like a middle ground, which is people who are making art that is not Christian art, right? But who are also Christians and who their art is informed by their perspective as a Christian, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes like you don't even know they are Christians. Although I think if you like, this might be like that, J.K. Rowling is an example of apparently a, you know, dedicated Christian person who works in the arts, right? Susanna Clarke, who wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and one of my favorite books, Piranesi, which is clearly influenced by her perspective as a Christian. One of the like most beautiful pictures of God I think I've seen in art.
Hmm.
But it's not a Christian book, right? And in fact, I think it's a book that like a lot of Christians would be like very uncomfortable with, or a lot of really conservative Christians would be. Even like, I don't know, do you know who Weird Al Yankovic is?
Yes. I don't know a lot about him, but I know he exists.
Yeah. I mean, wild parody nerd, like parody music, nerdy subjects. And like also a Christian man who apparently is just kind of like a real serious dedicated Christian. So like these people who, and I didn't know that about him for maybe like a decade before I like it was a decade of listening to his music before I actually uh heard that he was a Christian, right?
Hmm.
And um if we're talking about conservative Christians working in the arts, and the people in the middle, we don't necessarily know how conservative or progressive they are, right? Through
Hmm.
their work necessarily. Um, but if we're talking about conservatives, we're kind of talking about conservatives in the arts. How do we know they're conservative Christians in the arts? They're making Christian labeled music or movies or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and I think uh, one of the like I think it's been I've observed, we've talked about a little bit I think a lot of people have seen like this Christian, explicitly Christian art is often just like usually really terrible,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and that's not necessarily art that is from a Christian perspective or deals with themes even in Christianity, but like labeled Christian art. Like the main reason people go see this is it is Christian art. So then the question is like, why is it almost universally just kind of like bad? Is it conservative people can't make good art? Is it like, is it something about like why? And I think a piece of it is if it is like if something is labeled, right? If the label is the most important thing about it,
Mm-hmm.
then that kind of like usually means a couple things, right? So if I go see a movie that's like a kids movie and it's stupid and like it is just made to like it's full of, like fart jokes and stupid stuff because haha kids are stupid and they don't know any better. Then if I'm talking to you about it, I'm like, I went and saw this movie as this dumb kids movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the main thing is like the label there, kids movie, is like the main thing that you need to know. Now, if I go see a Studio Ghibli movie, like it might be a movie that is really made for kids. It might be appropriate for kids, but I don't go, oh yeah, I just saw this kids movie. Like it's a movie that can kind of stand on its own,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not like uh like apart from any sort of label, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a kids movie, it's a movie
Mm-hmm.
that is, like really good or beautiful or whatever. And then I'll start talking about like what I liked about the movie rather than label it.
Mm-hmm.
Um so I think if you think about the example of a kids movie, why would the label be important? I think first, if it's a movie that's pandering to kids, that's just kind of like, hi, I'm not gonna try to make a good movie or a beautiful movie or a movie that's resonant that also like is on works on the level of kids. I'm just gonna try and make a stupid movie that kids will, you know, pester their parents to watch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like pandering is one piece of it that makes labeled art bad. The other one is like uh uh the creators hope that people will see it because of the label, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like if you say, okay, this is the kids movie, it has a goofy squirrel on the front. So that's going to be something that's a really simple, easy thing to like, okay, I can go see that with my kid,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? I think it's the same way with the Christian label. One is like you get Christian art, the Christian label, that is just really a sign that like you're going to be pandered to as a Christian and you're going to be told like, this is, going to make me feel good about being a Christian. It's going to reinforce the fact that I've made the right choice and that, Christians are smart or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other thing is like, it's not a good movie. And so they're hoping by putting the Christian label on it that people will see it just because of the label, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Christians will go see this because it is a Christian movie. I think that's um, two reasons why these movies tend to be kind of universally terrible because they don't. And I think it's ultimately kind of like resentment for the craft. Like they don't care enough about movies to make a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care enough about music to make good music that's good in and of itself. So they have to have the Christian label to be able to like sell it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, what do you think about that? Is that like
Yeah, no, that's a very good point about the labeling. I think that there's definitely with Christian art, it seems like the main purpose of Christian art is to reinforce the values that the audience has already chosen. It's like there's nothing new being said here. It's like, oh, you believe this, and we believe it too, and aren't we wonderful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the main purpose. And in the process, what often happens is I think it truncates the humanity
Mm.
of its characters. You know, it makes it discards the deep in favor of the obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And why it does that, I'm not sure. I mean, the cynical side of me would say, well, it's because Christians are shallow. I don't think that would be a fair assessment, but that's one that my brain likes to leap to sometimes. Um, what would be another reason why?
I mean, people like being pandered to.
Yeah.
I think it's a failing of humans in general. Like
Hmm.
people like being reassured. It gives you a little bit more certainty.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, I think uh, reaching for certainty betrays kind of a lack of trust in God. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
honestly, like that God is good and that God is going to like is not what uh like leading you down a false path, right?
Hmm.
But certainty is something that is very much it's a human constant that we kind of uh, have a craving for certainty.
Hmm.
And pandering not only like appeals to your prideful ego, right? Like pandering is like, oh yes, you're very good, you're right, you're smart, which makes you feel good. I
Hmm.
think that's not good that we indulge in that, but it's
Yeah.
obvious that we'd like to.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing is it gives you certainty that there are other people who, I mean, charitably, I like to read a book where someone has the same view of reality as I do, because even if like I'm not reading the book to kind of like quiet my doubts or fears, right?
Hmm.
It's still uh, I guess on the good side, it still puts you in line with someone else, and you can kind of feel like there's someone else who I'm not just. I mean, I'm not just a lone person who thinks this or who sees the world in this way.
Hmm.
I can see that this person too,
Hmm.
uh, at least, uh, sees things as I do, and that can be comforting and good, or it can be like I'm anxiously reaching for certainty,
Hmm.
um, just depending on where you know
Yeah.
where you are. Um,
But I would argue that even like movies in particular that do that sort of thing, they they seem to often fail in telling us something that we don't already know. If that makes any sense. So there's nothing at all wrong with like wanting to watch something or experience art that is on your side, so to speak. Like even great art, like I think of like sacred art, like works of Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, like the Last Supper. Like there's nothing wrong with going to look at the Last Supper, even though it's like clearly, clearly, of the same values as you.
mhm,
But I think that I'll quote Jordan Peterson when he says that great art is a wellspring of meaning. And so it's not that art that's great has to be like different from you or telling you something you don't believe, but it has to be telling you something that you didn't already know about whatever it is you're looking at. So like if you look at like the Last Supper, like that work of art should be telling you something. It should be tapping into some kind of deep undercurrent that you didn't know existed before. And
Mm.
it might be going in the same direction as you, but maybe it's like going at a different speed, or maybe there's different, mysteries down there to uncover. And I think great art really has to do that. And so much of like the Christian movies, like I think some of them try. Like I would credit at least the Irwin brothers in particular. They seem to be like a step above the rest.
What have they done?
They've done Mom's Night Out, October Baby, Can You Imagine? I think that's what it's called. Woodlawn.
Okay.
So those are movies that I think try to like tap into the humanity and maybe a bit of the mystery. But so many Christian films like that's, and I would also be willing to ascribe that to the fact that most Christian conservatives score low in trade openness. So
Mhm.
they don't look for anything beyond the familiar. I mean, that's a hallmark of conservatism. It's like we have a good thing and let's just keep it, and we don't need anything else outside of it.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful blueprint for preserving the bridges, making sure the buildings don't fall down, um, and keeping the energy grid going. It's wonderful for so many aspects of society. But at least in the Catholic tradition, we have a kind of an axiom that if you're not progressing in the spiritual life, you're regressing. And
Mhm.
there's also a quote, I believe it's by St. John Henry Newman, who said that, how does it go? To be perfect is to change, and to change often, or something like that,
Mm. Right.
which is kind of shocking to a conservative Christian mindset, and even a conservative Catholic mindset. It's like, how dare you suggest we need to change anything? It's like, well, but if you're not a good person starting out, then you need to change and become better.
Mhm.
But then I think that that might be a bit of a theological difference, though, between Catholics and Protestants, and that the general Protestant view is that once saved, always saved. So when you accept Christ, it's like that's it. You've been saved. You're done. Whereas the
It
Catholic
highly
position,
depends on the denomination, but yeah.
really, okay.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the Catholic position, at least the Catholic position, is supposed to be that. Guess what? When you're baptized, that's not the end of the journey. That's the beginning.
Mm.
That's just the
Right.
beginning. And so you have a lot of work to do left.
Mm.
Um, but I think a lot of Catholics have probably also, a lot of conservative Catholics are probably closer to evangelical Protestantism than they'd like to admit.
Mm.
And
Right.
so they probably buy into that same assumption that, well, I'm one of the good guys because I got baptized, and,
Mhm.
all that sort of thing. It's like, well, and then there's Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who says that the line of good and evil runs down the heart of every human being. And I think that's
Mm.
also where that's another aspect of great art, is that it really highlights the struggle to be a human being.
Mhm.
And when you have a viewpoint that says that, oh, well, I and my people can do no wrong, and they and their people can do no right. Well, it's kind of cheap.
And I don't think it's ultimately foundationally Christian,
Yeah.
because like once you are the good guy, I think you're discarding a lot of Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I like a large portion of you know what it is to be a Christian is that we are all sinners in need of grace.
Mm-hmm.
We and like there are, I think the role of works within the Christian life, like there are a bunch of different views on the role of works in
Mm-hmm.
Protestantism, and I know like I think that there are really heavy like all right, it's just faith. um Works are expression of faith, and like works need to be continually done to renew your faith, or your faith is going to die, right? Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of different views of works.
Hmm.
um but the idea that you're a Christian and so you're a good guy, like you're one of the good guys, like no, you're a Christian and you recognize how bad you are and how sinful we are all are, and how much we all need Christ.
Hmm.
um uh but to go back to um your point about the arts, so like telling arts need to tell you something that you don't already know.
Hmm.
I think that's right. But I think that's for a portion of arts, of the arts. Like I
Hmm.
think there's a place for like that is, I think the arts can do different things. I think arts, if you think about them in terms of three different values, like goodness, truth, and beauty, right? Like something can be beautiful and it doesn't necessarily teach, like, I can't really say that this has taught me anything in particular new, like intellectually,
Hmm.
but I can appreciate the beauty of it because it's just, I mean, it's so well made. It's such a wonderful, like representation of the beauty of creation. Like I think that is um a legitimate reason to make art, even if it's not necessarily like teaching me something new. Um, like if the main value you're addressing is truth, uh, like and even like truth is complicated, and you're not going to be able to come up with really simple, uh, comforting solutions and make great art. I think you tend to like that tends to be glossing over way too much, and you end up kind of telling a lie.
Hmm.
I think this is the case with a lot of like low quality Christian art, where like maybe it's in there, and this is where we step over into a discussion of propaganda, right? Like if the message is more important than truth, like then often you get over into lies. So like
Hmm.
the handful of Christian movies I saw in high school, college, against my will, um, like had kind of a similar plot line, which is like man is far from God. He also, you know, he and his wife can't get pregnant. He can't win the football game. He's uh, uh, has a bad job, and his kids hate him, right? And then he has the moment where he falls on his knees in front of the cross in the forest, and then they get pregnant, they win the football championship, he gets the job, and his kids love him, right? And that is more wishful thinking or propaganda than it is a truthful representation of life as a Christian,
Yeah.
right? um and they may have done it out of the like, and probably did, out of the best of intentions, like let's try to put the Christian life in the most charitable, like appealing light possible, trying to sell Christianity. But I think if you sell Christianity using what's ultimately like drastic oversimplification or lies, I think you're very misguided.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so I think great art, um, great art needs to grapple with like the complexity of uh, our lives and of creation, um, and that's going to be messier and more complicated and more human than I think a lot of this art wants to be. Right?
Yeah. I want to push back a little bit when you said on beauty, that you can, beauty can kind of be in isolation, so to speak. Um, I think that if you have a beautiful painting of a sunset, that can definitely, if it's done right, it can connect you to some of that deeper undercurrent. Like it can really but part of it is not just the painting itself. Part of it, a big part of like art appreciation is like stopping and sitting with the painting or sitting with the beautiful thing. If we're talking about specifically paintings, then um a lot of the responsibilities on the viewer to like, hey, like stare at this painting for like a minute and let it immerse yourself in it, and then tap yourself into what's going on. I think if you do that, you'll like, I've got a Caravaggio painting up here. The more you let yourself enter into that world, the more you find yourself drinking from that deep well. um Even though it's just like, it's beauty, like it's, I mean, I guess there is subject matter to it as well, but even a sunset, like, or like this, there's this painting of a purple tree in my room here too. You sit yourself with it, and just the colors and the composition will, like, they all say things. And so when you allow yourself to be immersed in that, then I think you can really like draw from that wellspring of meaning. But so often, like, I know exactly what movie you're talking about, by the way. Exactly what movie it is. And that movie in particular, there's no wellspring. Like, all the meaning is obvious. Like, there's no soul to it. There's no like reaching deep into the heart. It's just like, it's all obvious. And so that brings me to my next question is, why do many conservatives insist on being upfront and blunt?
I wanted to ask you to clarify what this question means, I guess. Like, are you talking about in general or like within the arts? Like
Both, like everywhere.
I guess I'm not sure that I like, could you describe a context that you're thinking about, like in which this happens?
Gosh, which one to choose from? Um, hmm.
Like, is it like, really brash kind of
The
stuff?
whole like, the whole idea that when you encounter something or somebody who's doing something wrong or has a wrong viewpoint, immediately, like, the conservative Christian idea is to just like go for the most direct attack, if that makes any sense. Like, so for example, if somebody is like, I'm in a crisis pregnancy and they're considering abortion, um, one of the things they might say is like, well, you should have thought of that before you should have kept your pants up or something like that, just stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's sure not every Christian is guilty of that, but sometimes it seems like that's the preferred method over like something a little more subtle or a little more patient.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
seems like there's this fear that if you don't say the most obvious thing in the moment, then somehow you're a bad person.
I think it is fear. I think it's a sinful reaction. I think there's like being judgmental is something that comes easily or naturally to conservatives, because, you know, one of the positive values of conservatism is like being able to make distinctions between things and being able to say, no, that is actually just bad. Like, that is actually just evil. That is not contextual. That is not, oh, well, I have to understand this person. We can love this person and appreciate them as a God's child, but we can also say what they're doing is evil, right? So, like, drawing distinctions between things is something conservatives do naturally. And I think that you need to be able to, in some sense, to have good judgment. But that is different than kind of judgmentalism, where you are pointing out flaws that you don't have, by the way, in someone else in order to put yourself above them morally, right? And that is like essentially either like grandstanding, making yourself the moral superior, making yourself feel good or better than that person, or fear, right? Like, if you're afraid that if you don't have a really strong reaction to something evil, that you're like that God is going to be angry with you, right? Or other Christians are going to be angry with you. I think that's also a sinful reaction out of fear. Like progressive, liberal, left-leaning people don't have a problem with, I mean,
anything except for
anything.
judgmentalism.
Yeah. And often, and like this is a complicated question, because there's certainly the harshly judgmental extreme left. But they're kind of harshly judgmental in in the service of like tolerating people, right? I guess, right? Like a conservative might, judge people based on their moral behavior, right? And a progressive might judge someone because they judge people for their moral behavior, right? So, yeah. But I think that is it. I think it's a couple different just sinful, self-centered reactions that conservatives can have, where like it's a lot harder and a lot I guess more fraught, more difficult to put your arm around someone, try to actually have a real relationship with them, try to understand what's going on, and try to love them and help them in their sin, in the situation they're in right now, rather than like, you're wrong, that's bad, you shouldn't have done that, tough luck, right?
No.
It's cruel, right? It's uncharitable, it's unhelpful, and it's not a loving act to just denounce someone for the sins they've already committed, and like, can't help you, you're already in sin. Well, we're all in sin, right? We all need help. So I think that's a big piece of it. Fear or pride, right?
Yeah. Where do you think the Christian art scene is headed? Do you think it's improving or getting worse?
I don't know. I chewed over this question for a while, and like, I don't think I have a really good picture of a movement in a certain direction. I do think that Christianity is we're going to have a significant revival of Christianity. I think we're already seeing that, especially with more high church and traditional Christianity. I think there's a huge movement of people towards Catholicism and Orthodox churches, and like the higher church Protestant churches, because I think we've had even within like the ascendant non-denominational churches, we've had like a lack of tradition and like lasting kind of like institutional beauty, and we've just kind of been starved of that, or starved ourselves of that in our culture. And so I think there's a lot of people, I think the return to more traditional, more kind of high church Christianity, I think is happening right now. It seems to be happening. And that's good. I think we also are seeing a lot of younger people who may have had parents who were not Christian at all, right? Who are really exploring Christianity, like maybe out of rebellion, maybe out of just like, all right, the world is a mess. We need some sort of like sustaining meaning, because we like making it ourselves is like a recipe for like tribalism and for like ridiculous, terrible, dysfunctional ideas destroying people, right? I think we've been so kind of extreme and so obvious to everyone that things are not going well in American culture, that I think we're going to see people reaching for Christianity anew. I hope that we're up to the challenge of I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of the cultural insanity, left and right. I think in part is due to the church failing at her job, right? Of whether it's kind of embracing really like church non-denominational churches, which are kind of like church as business mega churches, which always end up being kind of like these really corrupt, awful institutions, and just like modern entertainment church, where we're going to dispense with everything that is traditional and like had like these deep wells of meaning, for like something that Rich Mullins wrote, yesterday. I think that's really mistaken. And I think it hollows church out to the point that there's very little left that is sustaining. Before and like that describes my current church too. They're theologically conservative, which is good, but like modern worship service, like nothing written past the last 10 years, whatever, it's like all really not good. And before Grace, we attended a Episcopal church in Seward when we were living in Milford, which was, and the Episcopal church is very generally theologically liberal and like really unfortunately theologically liberal, but they follow the liturgy. They have a structure, you know, a beautiful structure to their services. And I recognized attending the Episcopal Church, there was something just kind of deeply sustaining in like following the rituals that have been part of the church for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
No. And in a way that I'd never experienced before, being just primarily in kind of like low church, non-denominational and anti-institutional kind of settings, where it's like, this is all, you know, let's try to be entertainment and let's try to, I don't know, be blandly appealing to everyone instead of like reaching, like standing on the foundation that the church has built, which is inherently and obviously deeper, richer, and more meaningful than something that, all right, well, we can come up with right here ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's the main point right there, is none of us in a vacuum as an individual can produce the great glory that the church has built over the past 2,000 years. And I say this as somebody who greatly values my independence. So I'm not I'm not a collectivist by any sense of the term. I tend to like to forge my own path in many things, but when it comes to like religion, like there is plenty there for me to draw on as more like, shall we say, inspiration rather than legislation, even though legislation is obviously there. But there's so much wisdom that like I would never have thought of on my own.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it does good to consult that wisdom. Incredible.
Yeah, and it's a humble posture because, you know, you like, it's not throwing out the, you know, careful you know, work of generations upon generations of Christians for, you know, it's not favoring kind of like, all right, modern stuff. Modern music is, it's just as good and people like it more. Like, it's a really simple and I think prideful picture. And I mean, the end point, you know, of that kind of thinking. So like, uh, uh, Church of Christ is kind of one of the, I think, the most extreme in terms of like uh, uh, throwing out church tradition entirely, because they like there's Church of Christ and there's Disciples of Christ, which both came from the same movement, but Disciples of Christ use instruments and Church of Christ does not. And why is there that difference? The Disciples of Christ believe that, you know, if it's not mentioned in the Bible, then it's allowed, right? Like instruments in worship is not mentioned, so we can do that, right? And Church of Christ is like, if it's not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, then we shouldn't do it, right?
No automobiles for them, no computers, no.
Well, no, that would be the Anabaptists.
Oh, okay.
Over in the Amish. But yeah, like there is that kind of inherent like disconnect. Like, well, maybe it's taking worship seriously, right? Like worship is, you know, we're really careful to just adhere to the Bible, but I think it's more like it is kind of Christian libertarianism.
Yeah.
It's just you and the Bible. Even context, like even understanding the context of a Bible verse was like dangerous, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like because it is just you, your conscience, and the Bible. But the problem with that is, and this is tied up with kind of remnant theology, the idea that like the church is always going to be this tiny remnant of people. And this is
Mm-hmm.
very Church of Christ thing. Um, the problem with that is uh, uh, it ultimately just ends up with the church of one, right? It's
Yeah.
just you, like, and this is what happens to the Church of Christ. There's a Church of Christ. We disagree, like projectors are not in the Bible. We split, and each side thinks that they're the remnant, and the other side is like wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we disagree about like uh, I don't know, this particular uh, uh, hymn. So we're gonna, and we disagree about folding chairs, and we just like, and the end point, and I see it with a lot of the families that I grew up with, is like, including my family, frankly, is they have their own church in their own home, and it's just them, it's just the family,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like that is the logical endpoint of remnant theology, is
Yeah.
like if the answer to every single time that you disagree about something is like you to schism, then you are going to always end up being like it's the church of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is my perspective, and because that cannot naturally, like, of course my picture of the Bible cannot agree completely with any other person's picture of the Bible. Ultimately it's just going to be you in your house, I think, like worshiping like your own version of God,
Yeah.
and without any sort of like input from other Christians or from church history or any sort of like possibility for correction or like guidance, submission to authority, or anything, right? No input but me. And I think that's really dangerous as a Christian, first of all, because we all get things wrong, and we
Mm-hmm.
need other, like, we need other Christians to help us uh when we go astray. But also, even if you're right, and even if you are the person who knows how to correctly interpret the Bible, just absolutely, which is just like arrogant beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you are right, it severely hampers your witness to be like there's no church institution. It's
Mm-hmm.
just me sitting in my home with my Bible.
Yeah.
It means you ultimately can't do a whole lot for anyone as an institution, and uh, like it's really unloving
Mm-hmm.
ultimately.
Well, I'm somewhere in the middle. I go to mass with everybody else, but I don't talk to anybody afterwards because
Yeah,
I'm too too much of an independent thinker and antisocial. There are a handful of people I'll talk to, but aside from that, most people just it's best if we not interact.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's not
But
everyone has
I
to.
no, I completely agree with what you're saying though. Like we are the body of Christ. We're not just one person, and just because we have disagreements doesn't mean we should split. I mean, even St. Peter and St. Paul had disagreements, and St. Paul didn't say to St. Peter, like, "Okay, I'm done with you. See ya. I'm going to start my own church." Well, I suppose some might interpret that he did. um, um, but yeah, there is strength in numbers. I think somewhere in Scripture, is in the Old Testament, I forget where, that a rope a rope is stronger the more strands it has. If you've only got one strand, then it's pretty easy for the devil to snap you.
So I have a related thing that I want to hear what you think about this. This
Okay.
is kind of cool. So a lot of my, rabbit hole into theology is like YouTube channels, right? Like
Okay.
theologians who do like deep dives into really esoteric theology, maybe like
Mm-hmm.
various denominations. And there was one uh, uh, video talking about the denominations, which kind of uh, uh, was calling for like we need to have a better sense of being Christian rather than like you're wrong on these theological points. You're wrong. Like we are going to have, I think, inevitably disagreements about
Mm-hmm.
uh, the thing the what the many pieces of the Bible that require interpretation and that are not super clear. The stuff that is like not like the core of Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this uh, this guy was talking about the church in terms of like the body of Christ having different functions,
Mm-hmm.
but rather like the typical picture of like, all right, yeah, every church has different people who serve different roles, but he was talking about maybe also the church as a whole has different denominations that serve different roles, and so there's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a unity and a diversity, like the 12 tribes of Israel. Like this is something that
Yeah.
is a way that maybe God wants us to be.
Mm-hmm.
And his there are some Christians, and this is he is a Presbyterian, and Presbyterians are kind of theology nerds, right? They're like heavy, like we have to nail everything down and understand theology, I think, too far, right?
That would
But
be
like,
Latin Mass Catholics in the Catholic sphere.
yeah. And there's going to be these people in every church, but there's also like Reformed tradition is kind of theology nerds,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and then there's like Lutheran theology, which is a heavy emphasis on the gospel and on Christ, which is kind of like the heart of Christianity. And I want to see what his, like there's Baptists who are extremely good at evangelization. And so like they're the feet of Christianity. They go and spread the gospel.
Yeah.
And he said, he called the Catholic Church the muscles of Christianity, where like you need
Interesting.
power and influence, right? If you're going to be effective in like kingdom building, right? So I'm interested in what you think about that characterization of the Catholic Church,
Yeah. Well, of the Catholic Church. Oh,
and
muscles.
just in general, like
That's
just the
funny
church in
because
general.
I wouldn't have thought of them as muscles before. So oftentimes we get accused that we're too weak and not taking hard stances on issues, but maybe I'm just listening to the trads more than I am Protestants on that issue. It's funny though, because there was a while back, there were these memes going around that were Princess Bride, or different Christian denominations as Princess Bride characters.
Okay.
And Catholics got Vizzini.
Okay. Does that strike you
Truly,
as
truly,
true?
truly, you have a dizzying intellect. Oh, that is, well, at least it's very true of the trads, because the trads are they're like you said, like it sounds like they're like Presbyterians. They're the theology nerds who have to debate every little tiny little nuance. Muscles of the church, that's interesting. I guess I don't know a lot of different Protestant denominations. I know, I know Baptists, I know Lutherans, I know Methodists, and I guess Church of Christ a little bit. I guess it makes sense in that sometimes by comparison, the church seems to take stronger and more firmer stances on certain issues.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what they mean when they say that, the Catholics are kind of like the muscles. Does that
And
sound
like
right? Or
Catholicism also tends to be more comfortable with like I guess institutional power, and like
okay.
has a lot, like
Well, we
the
haven't
Catholic
been that
Church is
way.
a huge
Yeah,
institution, right?
I guess we kind of have, but I don't know. I guess it doesn't feel like we have institutional power because the Papal States disbanded like several centuries ago.
Yeah, but like,
And so many Catholics just don't listen to the Pope. So,
yeah.
um,
But like,
I guess
you know,
that makes sense. The institution is there, where I suppose with other Christian denominations, it's not. So yeah, I guess that makes sense.
and like, we've been talking about like the Pope can challenge the U.S. president and get in a fight with him, and that is significant and means something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no, I don't know, evangelical preacher who's like taken on the president, right? Like,
Gosh, they would die first.
yeah, like the Pope and the Catholic Church have a um, influence within the political sphere and within the world that is much more, and it's partially size, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's also like the global kind of picture of the Catholic Church, like you have the global jurisdiction of the Pope, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where a lot of churches are much more Protestant churches are nationally based, right?
Mm-hmm.
So uh, uh, much more kind of like focused on smaller, more local churches.
Yeah.
So and I think both are important and necessary. I don't think that there's one way that the church should be.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, but I also don't think that there is an infinite number of ways that the church can be. And this is why I'm trying to dig into theology more. And you say like realizing things like the Church of Christ is not a Protestant church at all, and is really came from the same movement that also spawned, by the way, like Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, and Jehovah's Witnesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like all of the, and these are not like, don't even believe like any sort of like core Christian, like they're not, I don't think they can be called Christian churches at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're something more on the line of cults. And I think Church of Christ is like very close to flirting with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I would say at the very least, they're a what? They have significantly broken with the church, and the result is kind of this fragmentation of like,
yeah.
And that is actually not something that is inherent to Protestantism, which is what I thought. Because like Protestants, they're all always breaking up from each other, right? And always fragmenting, and that's not untrue, but it is actually not for like the Protestant church history, like you aren't supposed to split from a church, and you're not supposed to like start a new church in a country that already has a church, right? You're supposed to join with the church. You're not supposed to like uh plant a new church, right? And in America, we have kind of a weird situation where we have 7 mainline Protestant churches, and was intended kind of for the different colonies, which were all supposed to be different countries, right? So generally, like you have a church for a country, national borders. You have the Anglican Church in England, and you are supposed to attend the Anglican Church, right? And you have the Church of Sweden in Sweden, and that is the church, and you're not supposed to just go start a new church. America, we ended up with 7 because all 7 came at once, and they were supposed to be separate nations, but they become one nation. But then what has happened many times, and it is crazy making, is churches, Protestant churches have become like drift theologically liberal, and then all the conservatives leave the institution and start their own thing over here. And this is the church I'm attending right now is Presbyterian, but it is a PCA Presbyterian, which is like a schismatic Presbyterian church that left the Presbyterian church over like theological liberalism. And I'm realizing now should not have, most likely. Same with like Anglican churches. Anglican churches left the Episcopal Church over primarily like gay marriage, and probably shouldn't have. Probably should have stayed and tried to reform the church rather than just pack up your things and leave. But it's tough, and I know that is a more of a Protestant issue because Catholics have a global view.
Why would they not leave though if the main church is going astray and there's no hope of fixing it, and there's no guarantee that the main church is always going to uphold the Christian truth, then why not leave?
It's not biblically supported. It's not supported by the early fathers. There are plenty of examples of churches even having like heretical teaching and serious problems, and it was never all right, start your own church. It was always, you need to take care of your house, you need to fix this up, you need to like challenge and denounce these teachers perhaps, but you're not breaking from the church. There was a huge value placed on we're still the church, and churches, like in small ways or large ways, need to be like, people are going to have the wrong ideas about things. There's going to be false teaching. There's even going to be heretical teaching within the church. And that's still not, there's no real biblical justification for that. And I think it severely weakens the it weakens the witness of the church because we have the fragmentation and everything, right? But also, and I think this is something that a lot of conservatives don't recognize, like people who are more progressively, like earnest Christians who are more progressively minded, absolutely need conservatives to say, look, like truth matters, like believing that Christ is God matters, believing that God is not just a metaphor matters. But conservatives also need, like earnest Christian conservatives need progressive Christians to kind of like help reform things when the church is wrong.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, we want to be, as a more conservatively minded person, we want to be really careful and really humble and really cautious with any sort of change that we make to the church, right? Because we are most of the time just in our own culture, in our own perspective, and like most likely wrong.
Yeah.
Most of the time we're wrong, but sometimes we're not wrong. And that tiny, like sometimes the church has been wrong for a long period of time and needs people to challenge it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so conservatives need more liberal thinking Christians.
I think of somebody like St. Francis of Assisi, who, oh gosh, it's terrible. I don't remember what date he was. I'm pretty sure he was post-Reformation, like just like right after the Reformation, or right after Luther split or was excommunicated. And he also saw, just the corruption and the indulgence of people in the church, and he's like, well, we need to get back to the gospel. But he didn't walk away. He worked within the church, and now his legacy lives on.
Why do you think that he was not excommunicated? Was it his approach was different than Luther's, or what?
I think so. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of what went on with Luther. I've never like studied it in depth, but from what I hear, by the time, from what I understand, Luther was very immovable by the time he reached this conclusion and challenged the church. Like, it was more like, this is the way it is going to be, and it's either this or nothing, And I'm pretty sure I heard a story that the Vatican tried to meet with him, and either he denied to meet with them, or he just like was immovable in his stances. And by that time he had come up with some pretty severe. It wasn't just that like stuff like selling indulgences, for sure, like that was reprehensible and needed to stop. And if he was calling the church out on that, he was right to do so. But then there were other things like, like the whole saved by faith alone kind of thing. There were some pretty serious doctrinal changes that he made that the church was like, yeah, we can't do that. Whereas St. Francis of Assisi didn't really make those challenges, but what he did was, like, within his order that he started, is like a radical return to the gospel, and living out poverty and following Christ in simplicity and that sort of thing. But he didn't like have any serious doctrinal issues. My understanding of Luther was a lot of what he did was prompted by scrupulosity. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but that's just kind of what I've heard and kind of the tale I've always been told. And as I've struggled with scrupulosity, and let me tell you, it can take you some dark places. So
yeah.
I have 2 more questions I really want to get to, and I think end us on a very curious note. The first one is, how do the arts make us more human?
I think the primary way is that they connect us to God and his creation. I think working in the arts is like God is a creator, and I think we are in his domain when we're working in the arts. Like even if we're not, like, even non-Christians who work in the arts, they might make terrible or immoral work, right? But the portion of their work that's good and beautiful and true still is like still is in the domain of God, right? Those are God's things. I think it's I think there's also just kind of a mystery or an intuitive, like uh, uh, implicit kind of uh, like when you're talking about being fed by the arts, right?
Mhm.
Like you can't really nail that down to any sort of like explicit thing that I'm learning or like cognitive, like it's kind of like humor, right? Where you can't really nail, if you nail it down, you kind of like it's less than uh like it only exists in the implicit realm, right?
Yeah.
Like if I explain to you explicitly why this thing is funny, it ceases to be funny.
Mhm.
And I think if we try to describe like how art feeds us in terms of like trying to capture that in words, I think we always fall short. Because there's a portion of it which just needs to be this like mysterious thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's it's a tough question, and I think one that I'm probably going to utterly fail to fully capture, right? Because
Well,
I
art's a wellspring of meaning after all. You know, you can't ever fully drink from it.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I think one of the ways it makes us more human is it just makes us look at what being human is. You know, it's like
mm,
when you look at a painting, it's like you're looking at, I mean, you can look at nature too, but you know, there's something very human about our relationship with nature as well. But you look at a painting, whether it's nature or a human being, like you're looking at humanity, and it calls us to just study what it means to be human. And just I think by that means of attention, it really I think it really does this the most in film, to be honest. Because in film it's like, oh, you're watching a story play out, and here's all these other different art mediums that are like calling or really drawing us to tap into, you know, oh, what is the real meaning of what this story is? You know, I think like a story, you just have a written story, that's one thing. I guess your imagination can supply some details, but when you have a film, it's very much like, oh, this is the story, but there's all these other art forms that are enriching it, that are just like, it's like, man, like there's a lot going on here, and it just really um I don't know, it just really like educates us on what it's like to be a human being. And I
mm,
think that's one of the reasons why Christian art often fails, because I think it's very much it it's it's more theology focused.
mhm, yeah,
And don't get me wrong, like I've certainly written my fair share of screenplays that have theology in them, but in my defense, at least my most recent one, I think there's a real element of humanity to it. And there's a reason why um, theology, philosophy, and psychology are different fields of study.
Mhm.
Like, it's not just theology. We have these other two fields, and sociology, if you want to add a third one. So, theology is, it's the study of God, right? But you know, the philosophy and psychology is more the study of the human being. And what the Christians get that the seculars don't is that, God is part of the picture of being human. I think they focus all on like God and not on, the realities and the brokenness of what it means to be a human wrestling to search for God.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if as is so often the case in our modern world, we've divorced the two. We've got the Christian art, with focus on God over here, and we got the secular art with the focus on humanity over here, and you split them apart, and they're just not interesting.
Yeah,
They're not.
specialization.
Yeah, especially.
No.
They're not interesting at all. So, well, what is your vision for Christian art? If you were in charge of the Christian art scene, what decisions would you make?
I mean, I would generally just I I'm not really I don't really have a grand vision aside from um uh I think I would like to see more Christians having the viewpoint that some sort of art, even if it's like not high art, like if it's like gardening or woodworking or whatever, um, some sort of art, continuing art, is just part of being a Christian.
Mm,
I don't. I think that's true. I think it's. Um, I think seeing it as like optional or a hobby or like leisure leisure time kind of thing, I think is diminishing it.
yeah,
When I think it should be, you know, elevated a little bit more in our value, in the way that we value it in everyone's life, as just one of the core practices of being a Christian.
absolutely.
Um, but yeah, I've got to wrap up here.
Okay.
Go, but I really
Yeah.
appreciate the discussion. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you. This was phenomenal. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We could talk about this for a lot longer, I think.
Absolutely. All right. Well,
But
thanks, Andrew, and everyone. If anyone out there is a gamer, you can find Andrew's latest game, Chop Shop, on Steam. Highly recommend checking it out. It's got a very, very distinct artistic style, and yeah. So until next time.